Cell Energetics by Kaylani, Ari, Luca, and Noah. So these are all the components of photosynthesis. And our summary of photosynthesis is that energy flows from sunlight energy to an energy storage molecule by using the enzymes in photosystem 2, where water molecules are split into high energy electrons, oxygen and hydrogen ions. The electron carrier proteins move high energy electrons down the electron transport chain, which moves hydrogen ions across the membrane, and ATP synthase adds a phosphate group to ADP, which makes ATP. The electrons are also re-energized in photosystem 1. The electron transport chain moves the electrons to NADP+, which makes NADPH. Then ATP and NADPH synthesize high energy sugars, and the energy is stored in the sugars. So our independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. So the Calvin cycle occurs in the stroma and converts carbon from the atmosphere into sugar molecules using ATP and NADPH. And our dependent reactions, the light-dependent reactions create oxygen gas from sunlight energy in water molecules. ADP and NADP+ are re-energized into ATP and NADPH. So the reactants that go into photosynthesis are carbon dioxide and water, and the products are glucose and oxygen. Now moving on to cellular respiration. So these are all the components that go into cellular respiration. And our summary of cellular respiration is that it has 3 stages. The first one being glycolysis. One molecule of glucose and NADP+ use 2 ATP to create pyruvic acid, 2 net ATP, and 2 NADH. The NADH is transferred to the electron transport chain, and the pyruvic acid goes to the second stage, the Krebs cycle. Unlike glycolysis, the Krebs cycle requires oxygen to function. This is because pyruvic acid becomes acetyl-CoA, which is oxidized, causing its electrons to be transferred to create carbon dioxide, 2 ATP molecules, 2 FADH2 molecules, 3 NADH molecules, which are both used for the electron transport chain, and carbon dioxide. The final stage of cellular respiration is the electron transport chain, or chemiosmosis. This stage uses the electron carriers NADH from glycolysis and FADH2 from the Krebs cycle to drop off their high energy electrons. These carriers are then recycled into NAD and FAD. The high energy electrons are moved through the chain while they release energy until they reach the final acceptor, oxygen. Oxygen combines with hydrogen ions and electrons to create a byproduct of water. The energy released from the electron pumps hydrogen ions from the matrix into the inner membrane space. The hydrogen ions form a protein gradient which powers ATP synthase. So the reactants that go into it are oxygen and glucose, and the products are carbon dioxide, water, and ATP energy. Now moving on to fermentation. So fermentation includes alcoholic fermentation and lactic acid fermentation. So these are all the components of fermentation, right? So alcoholic fermentation is when pyruvic acid and NADH make the products alcohol, carbon dioxide, and NADP+. Alcoholic fermentation is carried out by yeast producing ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide. Alcohol fermentation is used to make alcoholic beverages and is why bread rises. Lactic acid fermentation, there's pyruvic acid and NADH, which makes lactic acid and NADP+. Lactic acid fermentation converts pyruvic acid to lactic acid, similar to alcoholic fermentation. In our depiction of energy, there's photosynthesis, which takes light energy and turns it into glucose. And there's cellular respiration, which takes glucose and makes it into ATP. Energy is transferred from one form to another through photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Photosynthesis uses light energy to make glucose, and cellular respiration breaks down glucose to create ATP. And this is further elaborating the Krebs cycle, glycolysis, and the electron transport chain.